The Prime Minister is imposing a new coronavirus alert system on England to try to stop the virus spiralling out of control. The three-tier system will replace current local lockdowns and comes into force on Wednesday. Most of England will be under Tier 1 restrictions, places at medium level of risk. In these areas, current national rules will continue, the rule of 6 and the 10 p.m. curfew for pubs, bars and restaurants. Next is Tier 2, areas at high risk. There'll be no household mixing indoors anywhere, but the rule of 6 still applies outdoors. Tier 2 is for parts of the northwest, Yorkshire, the northeast, the Midlands already under local lockdown. But today the whole of Nottinghamshire and South Yorkshire, parts of Cheshire and a small area of the Peak District are among new areas put into Tier 2 restrictions. The highest level is Tier 3, places at very high risk. There'll be no mixing of households anywhere indoors or in private gardens. Pubs and bars will be closed unless they serve what's been called a substantial meal. Liverpool City Region is the first to be placed under Tier 3 restrictions. In the rest of the UK, a decision will be made on new lockdown measures in Wales in the next few days. In Northern Ireland, health officials are calling for decisive action. And in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she will draw up her own tiered framework towards the end of the month. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
Stand by. We cannot see clearly what is ahead, but the Prime Minister is reluctantly marking the way to a tighter phase. The lecterns back in their place. Despite repeated rule changes, coronavirus is not in retreat.
The number of cases has gone up 4 times in 4 weeks, and it's once again spreading among the elderly and vulnerable. These figures are flashing at us like dashboard warnings in a passenger jet, and we must act now. We are today simplifying, standardising and in some places toughening local rules in England by introducing 3 levels of COVID alert.
Only the 1.5 million or so people in the Liverpool City Region will be in the toughest category. But in England, more than 4 million people face extra limits from this week.
No one wants to impose these kinds of, least of all me, wants to impose these kinds of restrictions, erosions of our personal liberty. But I'm as convinced as I've ever been that the British people have the resolve to beat this virus and that together we will do just that.
So Liverpool's pubs will be shut by the time it's Sarah's actual birthday later this week. The Mottishead's wedding business hasn't had a job for 6 months, so she's taking on extra shifts as a nurse. But like many, they're worried about paying the bills and protecting their family too.
I worry about my kids as well, not being able to socialise and go out and see their family and friends. So, yeah, it has a huge impact.
Where businesses are forced to close, the Treasury will pay some of the wages, but only 2/3 from the start of next month. Rebecca owns the bar and worries it's not enough.
A lot of our staff, they only do 17 hours a week, so if they're only going to be getting paid 63% of that, they're not going to be able to afford to live.
But as cases rise, could we be stuck in a painful holding pattern?
Prime Minister, you've said many times you want to avoid another national lockdown, but it seems every week you introduce extra rules and cases still rise. Are you just delaying the inevitable?
I really hope that we won't have to go back into anything like a national lockdown of the kind that we did in March and April. We could go for a national lockdown again. I think many people would think that was extreme and it would do a great deal of extra harm to our economy.
Professor Whitty, are you confident what's being announced now is really enough to slow the spread of the disease?
I am not confident, and nor is anybody confident, that the Tier 3 proposals for the highest rates, if we did the absolute base case and nothing more, would be enough to get on top of it. And that is why there's a lot of flexibility.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement. And Westminster wants local leaders to make some of the toughest calls. Here in the West Midlands, many are unhappy about how the government made its decisions. The Tory leader cross that mixing with other households has been limited here.
I think it is very disappointing. It's, my view, not the right decision, both for the health and indeed the livelihoods of citizens across the West Midlands. And quite simply, there's very, very little evidence that locations like this pass on the disease.
Rules vary still in Wales and Northern Ireland, but Scotland's already closed many pubs.
We will be looking to align as closely as possible with the other UK nations. I think it is important and it makes sense to try to do that.
Labour does back the approach, but not how the job's being done.
I'm now deeply sceptical that the government has actually got a plan to get control of this virus, but it increasingly feels like the Prime Minister is several steps behind the curve.
The threat from this pandemic is sadly familiar, but the political climate's so different. Rather than step confidently forward, this place feels riven with doubt.
Our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, joins us now. And that warning, Laura, from Professor Whitty was notable, that even the toughest measures may not be enough.
It really was, Sophie. You know, Professor Whitty has become known for his candour, speaking very plainly at these press conferences. But it was very striking to hear him say so boldly that even the toughest set of restrictions that the national government is willing to put forward at the moment won't be enough unless they are accompanied by a layer of extra restrictions decided on by local public health leaders around the country. Less surprising that might be, however, when about an hour after the press conference concluded, the government's scientific committee, he and all the other experts that Boris Johnson consults, published a set of recommendations that they agreed on the 21st of September that argued right then for a much more extensive national programme of measures to be taken at that point if there was to be a chance of slowing down the pandemic and really getting a handle on the disease. Now, Downing Street tonight saying they've never pretended there are easy decisions here. It is a constant balance of dilemma between how not to hurt the economy and how not to hurt people's health. But I think that publication from Sage tonight really reminds us just how different the opinions can be on what really the right course of action is here.
And Laura, there are questions tonight as well over how much support the Prime Minister is actually getting on these new measures from regional leaders in Northern England.
Well, that's right. Again, it was interesting to hear the Prime Minister lavish praise on the leader of Liverpool City Region, Steve Rotherham, a former Labour MP who's the mayor in that part of the country. He's the only one so far who has been willing to agree with the government's new set of tough restrictions, except almost as soon as Boris Johnson had finished lavishing praise on him, he was out there online saying actually the restrictions had been imposed on him rather than anything that had been agreed with the government. Now, let's face it, local mayors are politicians too. There are, of course, agendas on all sides here. But it's interesting today that we've seen Downing Street try to shift some of the power, some of the responsibility onto leaders around the country. There have been tensions between the two all the way through this. And now 7 months into this pandemic, it could be one of the shifting contours of this that changes our politics for good.
Laura, thank you. Well, it is the Liverpool City Region that will have the toughest Tier 3 restrictions imposed from Wednesday. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas is there.
Yeah, Sophie, this place has closed its doors now. It's after 10. But by Wednesday, there will be many places across this Liverpool City region that will be closing their doors for the long haul. And there is a weariness here now. This is a place that has already experienced 10 days of tough restrictions. Now, people here are told they've been placed into the highest level. Yes, to bring cases down. Yes, to save lives. There's an acceptance here that that needs to happen. But speak to some people in hospitality night and they're asking the question why? Why the Liverpool City region has to close its pubs when you just go down the road to Greater Manchester with high coronavirus cases. Their pubs are remaining open.
We're entering a new and crucial phase in the crisis.
Some days the news is hard to take.
So we're giving local authorities across
the strictest coronavirus rules.
In the Liverpool City region will move to the very high alert level.
There is no hope, I don't think, because because you don't know the end.
Avoid household mixing. Pubs, bars to close.
I think a lot of people will be panicking. You know, food banks are a big thing in the city at the moment because of a lot of this.
Everything that I love and I care about, the same as the theatre industry, the events industry, has been stripped from me.
It's just another level of confusion.
Danny owns several bars. He employs hundreds.
All we've done is put protection in after protection in to try and put an offer that the government are happy with, and it's just never enough. Every day is just fighting another fire and try and protect as many jobs as possible.
Can you protect them all? What's the reality?
It's no.
And not just pubs, gyms are to close too. After the first lockdown, Jonathan's business is on the edge.
I'm scared. This is our source of income. We've recently just had a child. Without this business, we've got no source of income. I'm worried that if there is another lockdown, it could be catastrophic and it could end our business.
So what next for James? A freelance personal trainer. He didn't qualify for furlough last time.
Waking up to it yesterday, it was like I was back in March.
What's at stake for you here?
Everything. My whole income, my whole job, everything's on the line.
So what do you stand to lose?
Everything really, my wage, my livelihood, everything I've trained for. I suffer from depression anyway, so for me it is a big deal to know that I don't really have that stability coming in.
Liverpool is home to some of the most deprived areas in the UK. On top of everyday struggles, there's real fear over this rising coronavirus cases.
We won't be leaving the house, we'll be staying inside. As far as we're concerned, if it's a tier 3 lockdown, it should be quite obvious that you shouldn't be outside.
A few doors down, 90-year-old Hilda, at risk, living alone.
When I hear this on the news, I get that depressed to turn over.
Really?
Yes.
Can you believe this is happening in this country?
I can't. You don't know when it's going to end, do you?
And that's the worst thing for you?
And that's the worst thing, yeah. I worry about the young ones, not with people. I worry more about the young ones.
How long will these new restrictions last? 1 month or 6? People here have been told it's down to them to bring the virus numbers down. Ed Thomas, BBC News, Liverpool.